to Bread and Butter, where we are serving up the basics for Hearthstone improvement. This is episode 114. I'm Tito Santana, and I'm joined as always now by our new co-host, still, Pylet. Pylet, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I am doing fantastic, and today we have a fantastic returning guest, one of our favorites, actually, although when I say he's one of my favorites, he's never actually been on with an actual host before. But RonMexico, Ron's here. Ron, how are you?
Good to be here. I'm doing well. How are you, Tito?
I'm doing well, thank you. You've been on with various sub-guests, like you've been on with World 8 and a couple other people, but
I just thought that World 8 was your co-host, actually.
We still don't have proof that Doc and Ron aren't the same person.
This is true.
They still have not been together.
This is fair. They have different vocal qualities, but we'll live with it. So, Ron, Emerald Dream, couple weeks old, I think. 2 weeks old? 2 weeks old? How are you enjoying it? What you been doing in Hearthstone?
Ups and downs. It's been all right. I think the pre-patch meta quickly became something that I wasn't really the biggest fan of. And now that there's been a patch, I'm a little bit more excited at the opportunities for other decks to have a chance to shine and see like more of just what the new cards can do. And if there's some cool, interesting, different archetypes out there. But first impressions, it was very much, whoops, StarCraft cards are still way too powerful. There's a few things they left alone. And also there's a couple of super toxic strategies that were enabled by the new expansion that maybe they should have thought about in advance, but I can see how at least they were like, well, let's not nerf things before we even release the expansion. But there were some things everybody predicted that instantly happened. And people were like, yeah, we thought this would suck. We thought this would happen. It happened. It sucks. So there have been some changes, and I think it's for the better.
Now, I'm curious because it seems like Hunter's actually good right now with various different ways to play as a Hunter main, regardless of the other parts of the meta that have been good or bad. How have you enjoyed Hunter?
It's been fun. There've been a few different archetypes that I liked. Imbue Hunter post patch, which was one of the big things, I guess, that the new set is pushing, actually looks like it might be decently competitive. It still is probably lacking a bit too much consistency, but some of the other stuff, like the aggressive versions with Egg and the Discover Hunter that really didn't lose much from the previous expansion and has a few different ways to go in the new expansion. Those have all been solid competitive decks. I've been enjoying it. I've cycled through a few, but mainly I've stuck to Discover Hunter because it's kind of just my favorite thing.
Yeah, I got stuck on trying to find the deck that would work for me, and I finally said, you know what, let's just try this Egg Hunter out. And I used it at the end of last month to get the Legend. I was like 12-1 or something like that to finish that out. It's
nice.
A good deck.
Well, they nerfed it now, but
what do you...
it's still probably fine.
I think so. Pylet, what have you been up to?
I've been taking the chance with the new patch to just try all the different decks that I can think of and find. Most of them having questionable success, but that's what the first 48 hours of the patch are for. So I've played Imbue Druid, Pirate Rogue, Crewmate DH, and Aggressive Death Rattle DH, Imbue Mage, what else? The Tree Paladin, as people are calling it, the Ursol into Shaladdersil into just play cheap overpowered stuff for 3 turns.
That one's kind of messed up.
That one's really good if you get there.
It might be a big problem.
Yes, agreed. And then trying to fiddle around with a tempo-based warrior. So went even for the day, which is better than I thought I was doing, so I'll take it. But yeah, really happy with a lot of the changes. I'm happy to see some other decks. I've actually run into other people playing Imbue Druid, which I didn't see anything before the patch. So hopefully that kind of gives all these other things a chance to shine. I feel like I've seen a lot more aggro just because the armor DH isn't completely strangling it out to where you have to win by 4 or concede on 5 when they play 7,000 armor pieces.
Fair enough. So I played that Paladin. The Paladin's pretty fun to play. I don't think it's as easy. I mean, obviously it's you play the card, it corrupts it, and then it casts it a bunch of times. But you have to worry about hand management and stuff like that. So it's
that's why the main deck's like Wisp and things.
Yeah.
It's like literally you just want to dump your hand over and over once you play the Ursal. Like I've queued into it a few times and found it utterly unbeatable. The moment they do the thing, it's over.
Yep.
But I mean, yeah, there's some careful hand management you have to do, but like you run the card, the weapon that gives you coins when you kill a minion. You run the other rogue card that gives you a coin on a combo. So you're usually playing the Ursal really fast because you also run 2 copies of the weapon that always draw Ursal plus the card. So it's kind of insane. And it seems to happen a lot around like turn 6 or 7 that they play the thing, if not sooner. And then they're just, everything else in the deck is random garbage nonsense that's just super cheap. So you can just get it all out of your hand and fill up your hand with crazy OP tree stuff and then repeat 3 times and it's gonna win. It's nuts.
I had a game that I was playing, and I was playing the deck and I won, but I had played a priest. I was playing against a priest, and they played Madame Lerzul and stole my Sadras, my whatever, however you say it, Shadrasel, the tree card. And then I played Urzul, and it corrupted and made it an aura like it does. Then the priest the next turn played that card without corrupting it, but it was corrupted.
Yes, there has been a bug going around. It's a very irritating bug. It happened to me recently too, where I played Kerrigan for 8, and my opponent had not played a card even above 6 mana. And then immediately after I played Kerrigan, they played a corrupted Shaladrisil. And I'm like, excuse me, what? So that's probably going to be something that they do in a hotfix or patch or some kind of bug fix soon. But yeah, something to be aware of. Occasionally, I guess, that can just happen, which doesn't make any sense. But there you have it.
And I had one, maybe it's worth running even if you're playing a low card deck that doesn't do it, just in case people can corrupt it for you.
Doubtful.
I had one game that I did want to talk about. So I've been playing, I think I mentioned the Demon Hunter, like an aggressive Demon Hunter I've been playing.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a quest right now for the weekly event, and it's play 15 Wild Gods. So I took this deck. I took out a couple cards. I took out the bear because as fun as the bear is, it's awful. And I put in Omen. Is it Omen? It's Omen, right?
Yep. The 10 mana thing.
I put in the Omen, and I put in the summon 2 copies of your Death Rattle minion that costs 5 or more. And I put that in there. And I was playing against a warrior, and the warrior got down on turn 5, the dragon, the legendary dragon that when it dies, for each time it dies, it summons new minions.
Right.
And I said, okay, I'm going to steal this. And I played Grifta. I got the right thing to steal it. I ran into it and killed it. So I got it on my side. And then that game became, my win condition was that dragon, because I was able to res it over and over and over again as a demon hunter. And it was some of the,
that's crazy.
Those are the games of Hearthstone that are like really fun when you like find your way into some really random weird space, but it makes sense in that particular moment. But like you would never be able to reproduce it if you tried. That was one of those games, and I just absolutely loved it.
I gotta say, the amount of times that Grifta has completely changed the outcome of a game is just off the charts. I mean, I play Discover Hunter a lot, so I will frequently even have 2 Griftas in my hand and get a chance to re-roll and do the thing. But with Discover Hunter, there's a lot of decks you run into where it's literally the outcome of this game will be decided by Grifta and Grifta alone. I need damage or steal or I lose. That's it. So,
now, do you like the card?
Oh, I love the card. Because if I didn't have that card, I would have matchups where I don't have that out at all. It's just, oh, they played this card, so there is no if this, then I win. If not, then I lose. It's just, I lose. That's it. Full stop. So, I mean, it can be very frustrating, but it's funny there's a lot of hate for Grifta, and for me, there's a lot of love for Grifta because it's like there's some seriously toxic strategies, in my opinion, that exist, and this is one of the only cards that creates any level of counterplay to a certain type of like strategy that at least I consider to be pretty toxic. Other people think Grifta's toxic, so you know.
Last week, the Robert Warshak gave me some grief because I liked Pure Paladin because I really like the Countess card, and I feel like the Countess was a lot similar to that. Whereas, like, I could either lose or I can generate something, and maybe I can figure out some combination of things to do with these cards to find a win condition. And that's why I find it fun.
Yeah, Countess was fun. I remember having some good clips with that card.
So, what have you been doing outside of the game? You were just celebrating about 3 seconds ago.
I was, yes. So I'm born and raised in Gainesville, Florida. My dad taught at the University of Florida for a lot of years, and it's where I went to school. And you know, it's been an ingrained thing for a while. And every now and then, one of the Florida college sports teams happens to have a really good team, which is what's happening right now in basketball. The Gators just won their final 4 games, so they are going to the national title game as one of the final 2 teams to make it out of the full round of 64 in the single elimination tournament. And it's pretty exciting. They haven't won a championship since 2007, which happened actually back-to-back years, and also happened when I was in college at the University of Florida. So it's a whole rush of like nostalgia and memories and good feelings for, you know, the school and the team. And I have so many friends and family that either lived or still live in Florida. I was on the phone for a while after the game, just you know, whooping it up with everybody I knew. It was a good time.
Yeah, I was at UMass when they were good.
Nice.
And we never won the championship, but it was such a
you mean like the Marcus Camby years?
Yeah, I was there for Lou Roll, Marcus Camby, the Calipari years before he went on to bigger and better things. And UMass wallowed in self-misery for the next 25 years. But it was a lot of fun. But what outside of enjoying your victories for your college teams, what else have you been doing?
Not really too much outside of that, honestly. I've just been happily basking in the free time that is available for not having to look after my parents' dog anymore. My parents went on a trip and I was looking after their dog for 6 weeks, like a 10-month-old puppy. So I had like no sleep for like 6 weeks. It was unpleasant. Great dog, really cute, really sweet, just, you know, barks a lot and has a ton of energy. So like it was like having a child that I did not sign up for. And now I don't have a child and I want it that way because I didn't sign up for that. So it's nice. So yeah, just get to kind of relax and I guess decompress a little bit is good.
That sounds like poor planning on your parents' part. Like,
well,
hey,
they had somebody that was going to look after their dog, and then they had a backup person that was going to look after them, and then both people backed out at like the last second. So they kind of like desperately asked me, and I was like, okay, sure, fine. And then after the end of the 6 weeks, I was like, this is never happening again. Like, I don't care if everyone else backs out on you again. I don't care if you have no other options. It's not me.
I more just mean though, why would you plan a vacation and get a new dog at the same time? Because new dogs are like newborns.
Oh yeah. No, that was it's a source of contention between my brother and my parents. They live about like, I don't know, 10 minutes away from each other in Berkeley. So that was yeah. He was like, "Why are you getting this dog right now? Why would it be a puppy of all things?" Anyway. They wanted a dog. It is what it is.
So Ron's been sleeping. Pylet, what have you been doing?
Not much. Had added some extra work to my workload here. Actually, not at my own school, but helping out another school that had some stuff come up to where one of my friends and former coworkers directs their spring musical. They had a couple people that could not do it last minute. So I'm filling in as a orchestra pit director kind of on 2 weeks notice. So that's been taking up some of my time learning that show. Thankfully the music is easy for it. And I've worked with quite a few people that are in the pit before, so it should be easy, but that's kind of taken a lot of my free time. Outside of that, just playing a couple other games here and there. Got into a little bit of Overwatch last night and played the April Fool's patch. Normally they just kind of do a couple goofy things for that day and throw googly eyes on everybody. They did a whole different arcade mode where everything is just broken and busted and flip-flopped, and it was insane because in game it doesn't tell you any of the different changes. I don't think it has the tech to show, like when you look at the hero details, to show what the differences are compared to the normal ranks and game modes. So I was just going in blind and seeing what happened when I push buttons, and it was insanity, and I quite enjoyed it for a Friday night. So
It sounds like
Yeah, I
I
mean,
like it.
I mean, small indie company. I'm sure it was hard to get the resources to actually put that kind of information in the game.
Hey, we finally have we're getting more information in the game. I think they've changed how you can go in and look at the hero details, like what all the abilities are when you're in game. Whatever the original keybind and stuff has gone away, and they put it in a different spot, I think. But now I think they're finally putting like the actual damage numbers in game after however many years. They're like, yeah, sure, let's actually tell you what these are instead of you having to look them up online. So we're getting somewhere.
There. Now, speaking of games that were released before they were ready, I've been playing a lot of Civ 7 and really enjoying that. And like I won my first game. I usually just play on Friday nights with my friend, and to play a game of Civ is an undertaking. And I played one game last week where I would do one age every day because it's now broken up into 3 ages. And I got my first victory there. And then today, kind of a quiet, rainy day, I took my kid to see the Minecraft movie, which was better than I thought it was going to be. It was camp enough where they were leaning into it, but not so much. It was Jack Black being Jack Black and Justin Momoa being Randy Macho Man Savage. So it was kind of it was all right. I enjoyed it more than I thought I would. It was much better than when I had to go see Dogman a couple weeks ago. But I played the Civ today, and I was trying to, like, I gotta get the show notes done, but you know how Civ is, it pulls you in, and you're like, one more turn, and then getting there, like, I wanted to hit this win condition, and then every single country, every single one of them, within 3 turns said, we're going to war. So I was dealing with that. I was just trying to get to a place where I could not be in war, and I'm like, but I guess we're not going to do that. But we're not here to talk about Civ. We're here to talk about Hearthstone. And we had a patch released this week on Friday, which was kind of interesting. They normally tell us about it on Tuesday and then release it on Thursday. And sometimes they release it on a Tuesday if they're feeling froggy. I don't think we usually get something on Friday because you usually don't want to release into production on Friday as a general rule, as anyone that deals with software, because you don't want to end up working the weekend when something breaks. But overall, it was a pretty big patch. But before we get there, Ron, you already kind of talked a little bit about this, but you sounded like you weren't happy with the meta before the patch. And we know part of it was Armor DH, like everyone else. Either you loved it or you hate it. Storm Rage loved it, by the way, and so did Smarms. So you can yell at them.
See, that's a surefire way to know that something shouldn't exist. Just saying.
Absolutely. But outside of the Armor DH, and maybe talk about that too a little bit, but like what weren't you happy about with the release?
I mean, mainly it was that the StarCraft set was just outshining everything else. So like, and that was predictable because the StarCraft set was so intensely powerful that it was pretty predictable that this would be something that would happen where, if you are going to make a deck, then you should put the entire StarCraft package in that deck with whatever class you want to be, and then you can figure out whatever else you're doing. And you should probably do something that works together fairly well with said package. And there were a few things that like went a little bit differently that didn't rely on that, like mainly Armored Demon Hunter, which was exceptionally toxic as a concept and a play style. And then there was a whole lot of things too. There was the rise of Murmur Shaman, which, to be honest, I don't think the patch really did enough to address, but it is extremely held at bay by the change in the meta. So Murmur Shaman is now terrible, but is a sleeping giant, I think. If anything changes to the point that that becomes remotely viable again, it will probably dictate some very unpleasant play patterns and play styles in the near future. I go into it if you want about like how the deck functions, but just saying the name of it often suffices for, any portion of the base that's playing the game and kind of gets to experience what it's like. Outside of that, there was the rise in Location Warlock, which kind of was completely everywhere and like maybe tier S or high tier 1 and just completely dominant, to where you either were going to queue Warlock and queue into Warlock mirrors, or you were going to play something else and hope that you could beat Warlock. And that led to the rise in Mage, which was also kind of, again, not really the type of playstyle that I find enjoyable, where Mage specifically was out to counter the hyper power level of Location Warlock and would just be stalling and freezing and gaining armor while freezing and then stalling some more, and then eventually getting to the point where it could have a completely insane blowout powerful turn that wins the game on either one turn or over 2 turns fairly invincibly. So all of that stuff just didn't really feel fun to play to me, and also didn't feel fun to play against. And when I'm trying to have fun in my game and all of the options are not fun, it leads to an experience that I wouldn't recommend.
How about yourself? Did you like the meta before or not, or what?
Yeah, I was in a very similar spot to where I felt like the meta was at least doing a decent job at trying to adapt. It's not like everyone's just like, oh, this is the busted deck, 50% of ladder is this thing, because we were able to find counters and then the counter to the counter, but it is the same 4 to 5 decks, and it just became those, and nothing else was anywhere close to them, I feel. I tried, and I feel like there were experiments, but just everything was so far away from those top 4 to 5 decks that it got stale very quickly. And I think that they did a good job of giving enough time to find exactly which pieces they wanted to hit, without it dragging on too long. Because I think if we were still waiting until next Tuesday like we normally would be, there'd be a lot of unhappy people. So that's kind of where I was at. There's just too many things that overly warp the meta way too early.
Okay, but let's talk about this for a second. We all agree, and I think even the people that were playing it agreed. Armor DH, super toxic, unhealthy play patterns. So let's pull that outlier out. There are supposed to be good decks and good decks that people want to play. And whenever we have a fairly balanced meta where there's like maybe a dozen or more types of decks you can play, every class almost is playable, people also complain about that because it's really hard to find the power outlier to win with. And it makes it a lot more, it makes it harder to climb. It makes it harder to have those endorphins from winning and stuff like that. So it seems like we can't win, right? It seems like either there are powerful decks that maybe are too powerful and hold everything back, or it's too balanced and it's hard to find decks that are fun to play because you're not having that power outlier. I mean, maybe I'm generalizing here, but like, so what are we looking for here? Like, where's a Hearthstone sweet spot where more people will be happy than not? Because no one will ever be happy. No, it'll never be everyone being happy. Where's a good sweet spot here?
Well, I mean, if you had an answer to that question, then you'd probably be the highest paid game dev of all time and have the most successful game ever. The thing is, nobody has a good answer to that, and nobody can decide on it because the experience is subjective, and what some people enjoy, other people might have the literal counter reaction to. So it varies so much based on like what you're looking for as a general play experience, who you're talking to, and how you determine, what the goals of the game are. In general, for me, I would say that I'm looking for the type of metagame that enables multiple different classes to have at least one competitively viable deck. So that you have a decent amount of variety within the game. It is impossible to please everybody. It's impossible to nail down whatever sweet spot you might have in your head as like, oh, now everyone thinks that the game is in its best state. There has never been a point in the 10-year history of Hearthstone without complaints, without even significant, loud, consistent complaints. So you could have a perfectly balanced meta, but a perfectly balanced meta is theoretically just a coin flip, and nobody wants to play a coin flip game. So you have to have something else that engages people. Sometimes it means there's particular existing attractive play styles that players have responded to in the past over the course of time and say, hey, there's a certain pattern or type of way to play that I really like. And, a lot of other people in the player base respond to that. That could be one thing you go for, but that's hard to pin down to make it healthy if you don't have other things kind of balancing it. So ultimately, the number one thing for me is I want to see variety. I understand that it's very hard to do that. I'm not a game designer, and I couldn't pretend to know the first thing about the complexities of how do you actually design the game to reach that point. It's just this thing that I want that I think maybe they could attain at some point, and I hope that they do. I don't know how to do it. I sure hope they get it. That's kind of where it's at. So it's nearly impossible to have like the perfect situation, but they can always strive for something that appeals to a large portion of the base.
This is why we like having you on, Ron. Very well said. Nice and articulate. I love it. Pylet, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. He said a lot of what I was thinking in a lot more articulate way than I probably would have. So I think most of us are just looking for, options. Everybody wants to have an option for whatever their preferred play style or class is. You have people who main classes, you have people who mainly play certain play styles, and everyone at least wants to feel like they have a fighting chance, and that's very, very difficult to do. I thought Wicked Good on Coins Concede the other week brought up a really good point of there have been, the past 3 years since Stormwind, people have been saying we want board base. Well, we kind of had something board based here to start because there were so few clears and there was so little from hand damage. It was just you were getting hit by giants on turn 4 and 5. That is the board, and the only way you could clear it was your board, and then people weren't happy with that because there's no way to fight back against it. So even then it's like, well, we got what we wanted, and nope, not like that. We don't want it like that. We want it a different way. So it's very, very hard to do. Very hard to design. If you think through, when they're making these cards and doing all that, obviously they have some sort of intent for pretty much every card. Not all of them are meant to be competitively viable. There's certain archetypes where it's just like, let's throw something fun out there that'll appeal to certain players, but if it's competitive, it's probably not a good thing. But I'm certain that I forget what set it was. Whenever we had the Fell Warlock cards, that never saw any play. There's no way that they designed an entire half of a Warlock set to never see any play whatsoever. And it just doesn't hit because that's what happens in card games. So, there's a very fine balance there, but I think looking at when they're making changes, looking for those, sentiment outliers as we talk about, which I'm sure we'll get into later. And then, looking at those S tier decks, because Location Warlock and I think the Egg Hunter or all the aggressive hunters of some sort were like almost 60% on archetype stats, and that's too much. So that definitely crossed the line.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Sorry, just to interject real quick. You brought up we want board based, and then like here's some board based stuff, and then people were like, oh no, not like that. And I totally like. I kind of want to agree on both sides of the aisle with that, where it's like, come on, you asked for this and we tried to deliver it and you don't want it. But at the same time, there's like this other feeling, which is, okay, sure, like 0 mana 8/8s are creatures on board. And like, yes, technically that is board based, but it's sort of the same thing. If you're playing like 3 of those on like turn 3 or something, or, 3 on turn 4 or 5, and there's 0 counterplay. It's like, I don't know. It feel like I was asking you for water. Can I have water? Can I have water? And then you throw me into a 10-gallon tank of water. Like, no, not like that. Wasn't it obvious that I didn't want that? I wanted a glass. What are you, insane? Like, so, I mean, and obviously it's really difficult to balance a game and design the game and have it the right way. I don't have the right answer for what it should be, but there are certain moments where I'm like, okay, even though I don't know what it should be, there are some things that I know it absolutely should not be, and I can't believe you went there. So there's a source of frustration like that I feel like sometimes is evoked by the decision making of the game devs and like some of the player base, where you get something like that and you're just like, I don't know how to explain to you what I want, but I also don't know how to explain that you should have already known that it definitely wasn't that.
Well, probably what happens too is you have initial design that has their job is to come up with cool, crazy ideas that's going to be fun and all that. And
because you don't want people bored. Hey. Yeah, I get it.
Yep.
I get it.
And then they give it the balance. The balance is like, what am I supposed to do with this? and it's cards like what do you call it? The Warlock card, the one that gives you 5 turns at the end. I'm having brain fog today.
Oh,
Wheel of Death.
Wheel of Death.
Wheel of Death. Yeah.
Wheel of Death. That card, everyone looked at it and say, "There's no way this is going to be good." And then it found a way to be good, and it wasn't necessarily just on it, but some people were even playing it against the.
That's
Warlock.
a whole other can of worms, by the way, Tito, because that card and the concept of that card leads me down a familiar conversation path where I'm like, why do we keep printing either toxic or garbage cards? Why is that a choice? Because Wheel of Death would only ever be extremely good or extremely bad without really any in-betweens. Similar to Murmur, similar to Dungar. There's lots of examples. It's kind of a pet peeve of mine. You brought up Wheel of Death and I'm like, oh, just the concept of doing cards like Quasar was another one. They just recently nerfed it, even though it sucked because the play experience was so bad when it worked. Like Pheno literally just quit Hearthstone because somebody did a Quasar turn, and it was more than that, but that was his excuse for the moment. Yeah, sorry to interrupt, but
no, that's what we're here to discuss. Like
the can of worms for sure.
Yeah, that was a nice parallel you made with Pheno there. Sorry, I couldn't resist. So obviously with a patch, obviously with a patch, we're looking to remove the outliers, the armor DHs, the Quasar rogues, whatever. But what are you looking? What do you want from a patch normally? Are you looking for just a shakeup? Are you looking for find more balance? Are you looking to? Does it depend on what's going on? Like in your mind, what is the job of the patch?
Well, probably there's the way that the team should be like using a patch, which is to try to address the power outliers and bring the overall health of the game into like a better state than it is now, where essentially you have more variety. Like I think that's what they're going for, just as a concept, where it's like, hey, like I previously said, what I want from a metagame is to have multiple classes be have an option for an archetype that is competitively viable. So we have as much variety as possible to make the game feel more fresh and exciting, and your different games feel more new instead of, oh, it's this again. Oh, it's this again. Oh, if I queue a game, is it going to be Warlock? Yep, sure is. Like that kind of stuff. You know, I don't want that. So I want the solution to that, which is give me more variety. And then there's the other side of the patch for me personally, and I guess for multiple like players, how they personally feel about it, which is, oh, is there going to be a patch soon? I hope they destroy the cards that I hate. You know, there's XYZ cards that I really, really don't like that create certain play patterns or enable certain decks that I have a very bad time playing against. And I hope they come in and they drop a tactical nuke on that card so that I never have to play against that thing again. So that's another thing. Obviously, that shouldn't happen all of the time. Usually something really egregious has to happen in order to get a card like nuked like that. But there are plenty of players out there who are just like, there's this thing. I don't like this thing. I hope they ruin it forever, you know?
That's fair. What are your thoughts, Pylet?
Yeah. To me, in my opinion, goal one should be the outliers. With those, power outliers, things that the win rate is just way too high, like we talked about, and the, sentiment outliers. I know people don't like that term, but I really I forget which former dev it was on the team, but, mentioned, at one point it's just like all balance changes are sentiment outliers in some form, because whether it's a toxic play experience or because it's way too good, you still feel really bad losing to it. So something doesn't have to be overly powerful for it to need a change, which is kind of where Armor DH was going to. As towards the last couple days before the patch, the win rate for the archetype had dropped to 50 or below 50, I think. Because it's being countered so hard. But the fact that you had to have an entire meta countering it because it was so toxic shows that it needed changed. And then goal 2 should be some sort of shakeup. And that's where the small changes. Okay, this deck is a little too good, or this deck, is a little too bad. This is something we thought would land. It didn't, because, we talked about people want variety. People want something different to play. And when we have the cadence that Hearthstone has of getting, a large set, 2 months later, a mini set, 2 months later, a large set, you need something kind of different in there, whether that's through development or through balance. And normally it's through balance because of, the meta being figured out and people kind of gravitating towards that after so long. So to me, those should be the main 2 goals of a patch. With, kind of maybe even sometimes more so the balance, but normally balance is solved by those 2, in my opinion.
Do you think we are we expect too much out of patches? Because I asked this because as you were talking, Magic the Gathering and other card games that are in physical form, you don't get patches. You get the cards, and then that's that, right? And they can ban cards from competitive play, but those are the cards and you play them, and you can't have these balance changes. We kind of have a whole different world where we are an electronic game. They can do a lot of things you can't do in a card game, but it's essentially they're both a card game. So do you think they release these sets where they probably could have made better iterations early on, and maybe like, hey, what if we didn't have to make a patch this entire thing? Or is that just bad? Would it just not be taking advantage of the space that we have?
I think something's needed eventually. Yeah. For a few things. One, it's talked about almost every time a new set launches. There are more games played in the first couple hours that the set goes live than the entire time that they're developing, just because of the number of players and the number of people involved. So there's going to be things that people in the community find and figure out that they might not have seen. Obviously, they catch some things or choose to let some things go that might be on the line. I'm sure that the armor DH was on their radar, especially after the brawl, but they decided to kind of wait and see what happens compared to Imbue Priest, where they saw in their internal testing that Raza with it was a problem and something that they decided to change before it even hit live. So I think that you have to do something. You're never going to have a perfect release, but even then, eventually it's going to get stale. I'm going to jumping back to Overwatch, since I was talking about it before. Shaking up the meta is a lot of what their balance patches do, to where we kind of see this rotation of what heroes and what characters are in the meta, because they push one character a little bit stronger, pull somebody back, whatever it might be. And that's kind of what happens, because they're only getting one new hero every few months. You can't release 140 things like a card game and change something up. So I think that that's something that is good for the space that we're in. That might be just me personally, but that's kind of my feelings on it.
It's fair. Yeah. I think those are good points. I would say to go along with Tito, your point about like Magic the Gathering and physical games, that, hey, this card is the card and, it already exists. So it either gets banned in competitive or, you just have to learn to play with it. It's a much, much different experience just because Hearthstone is a digital card game, and you have, like Pylet was talking about, so many games played just in the first few hours of an expansion, and you have data aggregation websites and all these different things that popularize decks and concepts, and, it's just this widespread sharing of information that is so intensive. It goes way beyond the possibility for any physical game to match. So there might be some like really super powerful broken type things that exist in a physical card game that don't get spotted or don't become ever present and extremely frustrating for a large portion of the players, because there's not that level of data that's constantly being shared with everybody and just perpetuated. So I think it's much more important for a digital card game to have more consistent patches. And I've gone back and forth on like the concept of it, where it gets really frustrating when you think about the fact that the design team is making an expansion and a mini set all kind of around the same time. And the mini set is supposed to be working in tandem with the expansion, you would imagine. And sometimes it supports archetypes that were introduced in the expansion, or just even offers like one additional piece or two that might put the whole thing together. But because we have so many games played before the mini set even gets released, and we have such a vocal and active community involved in the game, you will always have a patch before the mini set comes out, which means we never ever get to see what the actual metagame as intended would look like. I mean, an expansion and a mini set, like the expansion is an incomplete set of cards that are completed by the mini set. At least that's how I view it. When it comes to like the timing of how they're designed and the thought that goes behind designing those cards and releasing them. But we never get to see it. And it created a lot of frustration in recent memory. One of the things like Sludge Warlock, it was too weak. It was too weak on the expansion, so they needed to buff it. But guess what? The mini set was right around the corner with everything that Sludge Warlock needed to become strong. But they buffed it before they buffed it, which was insane to me because like, hey, you guys know the mini set's coming. Why would you adjust it now? And like it stayed adjusted. Like they didn't adjust it back. That drove me insane. So there's different types of things with the patches where like there's some information that, well, a lot of information, I guess, that the rest of the community doesn't have, that the balance team does, especially with foreknowledge of what's coming. And they don't have the extensive amount of testing that they'll get when the game actually gets released. But sometimes there are other things that just the player base kind of identifies right away. Whoa, this is obvious. Like, I mean, we didn't need a ton of games to know that armor DH was going to be a really stupid, awful strategy. Like, you look at the 5/3 and it says resurrect a death rattle that costs 4 or less. Okay, let's go into the collection and look at death rattles that cost 4 or less. Holy, look at this ship here that I can just resurrect over and over. It has taunt and armor and everything I want. Why? Why is that something that even has a chance to exist when they've shown the willingness to preemptively do other things like, oh, imbue priest with Raza is going to be a problem, right? But armor DH won't? Are you out of your mind? So, and like, I feel like that might be being a little bit harsh too, because there's only so many people on the team. They're handling a lot of different jobs at once. There's a lot of things going on. So there's a portion of the player base that's like, hey, this stuff is obvious. This pisses me off that you would do this. How could you not see this coming? But it's impossible to know all of the different hats that they're wearing and all the different things that they're juggling. It's frustrating because it's really difficult to try to balance the game properly. And overall, we might even need more patches than the current cadence, even though I too have been frustrated with the idea of, hey, there's kind of a lot of patches. It kind of feels like too much sometimes, but then other times it's like they didn't touch something for 3 weeks. And, you know, that's fine for the majority of the player base, which is probably why the cadence is the way that it is. It's not fine for the dedicated, I guess, like obsessed with Hearthstone or careers around Hearthstone type people, like me, for instance, as a streamer who is playing 5 hours of Hearthstone games every day from Monday through Friday. You know, so I've got 25 hours of Hearthstone per week. And if something is toxic, it's toxic all week. That's a lot of hours of things just that really suck as an experience. So I want a patch like right now if something is a problem. And I know that's not realistic. And also like the general player base that makes up, you know, the majority of the population, they might experience that same level of, oh, this kind of sucked for like 3 hours in that week. But then they just stop playing. They're like, oh yeah, no, that kind of sucks. I'll probably come back after they patch it in like 2 weeks or something. You know, isn't that also a problem? Anyway, I said a lot. I could say more.
Absolutely. Now, do you think that the tech's not there, so they can't do this? But if they had the opportunity, like you log in and you just got a pop-up saying, hey, we've moved the spaceship from 4 to 5 that gives armor because we just one card or 2 cards just to kind of keep the meta shifting. Like, hey, this is a problem. We're going to do that, and we might move it back. Do you think that would be better, or do you think that would be too much movement?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. I think it's something that I would want until I see it in practice, and then maybe I wouldn't want it. And I can't honestly tell you that I would have any kind of accurate judgment on that. I would like to see it as an experiment, but I can see how that would go extremely wrong. But also they don't really have the infrastructure to support it right now, and it's like a 10-year-old game client, and they don't have enough staffing for it, so it's not something that realistically would ever happen for us to really go down that thought experiment and say, hey, what if this is a possibility? Because it's not a possibility. We can talk about the what else if we want and like think about, hey, wouldn't that be interesting? But it won't happen. So it's not really that worthwhile of an experiment to me.
That's fair. You did bring up something about how the mini set is usually part of the full set, and they like you good example was Sludge Warlock, how they buffed it, but it was going to get pieces in the mini set anyway. Do you think that a lot of the changes are driven by the community, by power outliers, stuff like that? Do you think if we got a patch, the patch before the mini set or the patch before the mini set, where they could say, hey, we understand that this is a little underpowered. We're going to buff demons and warlocks, so maybe you can find something there. The reason we're not doing that is because it's getting support in mini set. And do you think that would fly, or do you think people would still just be angry?
I mean, people would definitely still be angry. You can't not make people angry. They'll always be angry. But it's not probably a very good PR decision, just because then people would be like, well, what are the new cards and why can't I have them now? And what's the artificial reason to delay them? And the artificial reason to delay them would be, well, this is kind of how our schedule works. And also, we're not going to tell you about these decisions and why they're being influenced by the mini set that's coming, because then there's going to be a lot of you that would just be like, okay, well, I'll just not play for a week until the mini set comes out. And then there's no games being played for their game for a week, which would be a huge problem. So there's a lot of other factors that go into play into why maybe they can't make a decision that they could articulate honestly to the community before something like that is coming. Everybody knows the timing pretty much approximately of when this thing will happen and will change. So I feel like there should just be a little bit more silence from them if that is the case. Like for using the example of Sludge Warlock, where people were complaining this isn't strong enough. Okay, just let him complain for another week. You've done that plenty of different times over the course of the game. Now you're going to address the complaints when you literally have an answer to the complaints that they don't know about, sure, and you can't tell them about yet, sure, but like, just wait. Just wait. If you already have the answer that's coming, just wait. Don't do the change now. So what was the crescendo, pun, of the community sentiment that caused them to decide, oh, we have to make this change right now? Like, I don't know, it's weird in that example specifically, but in other moments I've also noticed it. And sometimes it's like, oh, there's a Christmas break or something else, and there's going to be a long stretch. But frequently the long stretches where there will definitely not be a patch, and we know that, have been some of the most unpleasant stretches in recent memory. For me. I don't know if it's like that for everyone.
I remember the Van Cleef days. It definitely can be difficult when you're going, when you now have this cadence that we have. And I think they've done better slowing the cadence down, because it used to be quick reaction. It's like, well, okay, if we're not talking about armor DH, we're obviously outlier, but like, hey, this deck seems like it's a problem. Well, is it? Like, give us some time to figure out the meta, and maybe It won't be a problem. And I'm glad they've kind of backed off on that. But the other interesting thing, one more topic before we get to the actual patch, because wow, I didn't think we talked this long about it. And just so everyone knows out there, when I ask questions, I'm asking leading questions because that's my job as a podcast host. It doesn't necessarily mean I feel that way. I'm just trying to spark conversation. But
you getting hate mail there, Tito?
No,
by playing devil's advocate or something.
I'll take hate mail. I just don't want people to think like, oh, Tito hates it. No, yeah. I'm just want to talk.
Fair.
So one of the problems with patches, and one of the hardest things that they have, is you can't just look at what's out there. You have to kind of look at, hey, if this is not there, what is this holding back? And then what is that holding back? And then what might emerge if these things aren't in the way? And you have to kind of go maybe 2-3 levels deep. Do you feel like they go deep enough when they do those things? Because they have the data, but do you think that they investigate it well enough most of the time? It always feels like we get to the patch before the mini set and we have a really good meta, and then the mini set comes out and ruins it. So it takes them like a month and a half, but they get there. Do you think they do a good job when they're doing these patches now, more and more about finding like all the different outliers? Like, hey, we got to pull this out. If we get rid of armor DH, then this demon hunter is going to be super powerful and then that means that this druid's going to start doing things and whatnot, and then that's going to become a problem for all things. That's hard. And like we said, we're not game designers. That's a hard thing to kind of wrap your head around. But do you think they do a good job thinking about that? Pylet, you want to start?
Sure. I think it's too difficult to go too deep into it because too many of the decks will change when those top contenders, get, knocked down and, things shift around it. Because think of even just now, we're a little more than, a day and a half after the patch, roughly. And how many of those decks that weren't touched have changed some of those final cards, the last 6 to 8 cards in the deck, because other things are now not as prevalent. And because of that, it shifts how things play. And it's so hard then to judge. It's just like, well, this is the third best deck, but is it going to shift up to the top spot once these top two go, or because these ones that were being pushed down now are better and it loses to that? There's too many pieces going in to really go too far into it. I think it's easy to see kind of the top 2 levels of really powerful. These are the next things that are definitely kind of slightly being held back, so we can touch those. But if you go too far, then you're just nerfing literally everything that's not tier 4. And that's, too far into the weeds. So I think what they do is fine. I think those are the, easiest things to do, and then let the player base sort it out from there.
Yeah, I agree with Pylet. I would say that, especially in recent patches, it's felt like they've done a pretty good job of trying to address the initial problem and the problem that might arise from addressing the problem. And it's really difficult to go further into that because there's just so many branching possibilities that come from there. And if you even try to go down this branching path and go from step 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, then there's a whole other different thing that you didn't explore or created because of that might lead to worse problems. So you really just need to address, for the most part, I would say okay, deck A is a tyrant and deck B might be a tyrant, and the only reason it's currently not is because deck A is a tyrant. So if we deal with deck A, we should also do something about deck B, and then deck C could become a problem too, but that's a problem for the next patch, I guess, basically, where we'll kind of see what happens from there, and we're just trying to open things up more. And I think that for the majority of the changes, because there have been a lot of changes in recent patches, I think the majority of them have been steps in the right direction. I don't agree with every decision. I don't agree with the extent of every decision on sometimes one way or the other way, but I think they're kind of still approaching it in the best way that they can. And it's a hard job. I'm a fan of the overall idea behind the changes that they keep consistently making and how they're trying to execute them.
Fair enough. And sometimes that deck C happens to be sharper DH, and they just, it overtakes the meta. All right, so let's talk about this current patch. So we have a lot of cards. We'll go through them and just kind of let's talk about if you agree with the buff or nerf, if it solves the problem, and if you think there was even a problem that needed to be solved. Just whatever your thoughts on it. The first one is Hideous Husk. This is the Death Knight card. Your leeches steal 2 more health from their victims. Battlecry summon 2/02 leeches. Now it is your leeches steal 1 more health from their victims. Battlecry summon 2/02 leeches. Pylet, why don't you start us off here? What do you think? Was this a needed buff? Was this the right buff?
Nerf.
Nerf.
Yes, I think that this hit it very well. It's still a good card. I think it's still meant to be a good card. But making it to where the leeches are stealing 2 health instead of 3 total hits a lot of breakpoints. To where now it makes it a lot more challenging for it to clear a bigger board. Makes it to where the Death Knight hero isn't getting as much. So, and I think it helps out with that. The leeches are still really good, but I think that the Death Knight kind of need the leeches to be good right now to be competitive. So I think that it's okay for now.
Yeah, totally agree. I think that card was winning games a little bit too much on its own, and a mana nerf would not have been nearly as impactful or important as the decision that they decided on. I was a really big fan of that nerf. I thought it was really smart.
And I think it could possibly be reverted when we have a 5 or 6 set meta. Not that they will, but one of the real problems is it's very easy to discover Hideous Husk multiple times with other options. So it's not just that you're getting the 1 or 2 times in a game, you're getting it 4 or 5 sometimes. So I think the nerf is good, but leeches are fun. I'm not sad that they're nerfed, but leech, that was some of the funnest things we did in the theory crafting. The next one is Amphibian's Spirit, which was 2 mana to 3 mana. This is the give a minion +2/+2 and Death Rattle, give a friendly minion +2/+2 and this Death Rattle. So it's basically Frog, the frog from Battlegrounds. The card itself doesn't seem to be a problem. It's more the interaction now where you can play this on a 0/2 egg and they kill the egg, and now the egg has this buff, and that's where the problem seems to be, because that's a new change they made, I think. But I think it did need to be changed. It was incredibly gross and strong and fun, but it's gross and strong. And the Egg Hunter. Ron, what are your thoughts on that change?
Yeah, it's reasonable. It's probably like the change they had to make. The deck was performing way too well. They were also nerfing other things, so they didn't want the deck to completely start dominating. And mana is very much at a premium in an aggressive hunter deck like that. So a 1 mana nerf, I mean, especially for a cheaper card at 2, you're basically increasing its mana cost by 50%, which is pretty huge. So I think that is something that probably had to happen. I'm not super thrilled by it, just, enjoying a lot of different hunter decks. Anytime a hunter card gets weaker, I get a little sad. But, I think it was very necessary for the overall health of the metagame to not allow that deck to keep just running rampant. So something needed to be done, and that is one of the strongest cards in the deck, so it makes sense to address that. The other card maybe would have been like Terror Scale Stalker, but it's a lot harder to make that one a more impactful nerf, so this one makes a lot more sense, I think.
I meant to ask too, on this one and Hideous Husk, are the cards still playable, in your opinion?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, both cards have absolutely like a bunch of support cards around them that make them extremely viable. So it's different from a different kind of nerf that might totally murder a card, make it unplayable because it costs 1 more or does like 1 less damage or something. Since you brought that up, my favorite example of a nerf that needed to happen to the card but went probably too far was Prison Breaker from the I think it was the Titans mini set, the Yogg Prison Breaker card.
Yeah.
It was like a 4 mana, I can't remember the stats, but it dealt 3 damage to everything on its battle cry after casting like a number of spells, and they changed it to 2 damage to everything. Well, the breakpoints are super important at 3 and super irrelevant at 2, so they instantly murdered the card. The card was everywhere. It needed to be addressed. They changed a damage point, and nobody ever played the card again. That is not the case with Husk and with Amphibians. Whoops. I don't even remember the card. I play Hunter all the time.
Amphibian
I can't tell
Spirit.
you. Spirit, that's it. Yeah, not the case of those 2 cards. They will absolutely still be played. There's an entire leech package that the Husk just enables immensely. There's Death Rattle stuff with Terror Scale Stalker and Hunter. The cards will be fine. They'll be strong but weaker, which I think is absolutely the intent.
Pylet, what are your thoughts on the Spirit?
Yeah, agreed. I mean, the card's better than I thought it was going to be when we were before we got the set, just because normally these types of effects don't land. We've had a couple of them. We have a couple others in standard right now. There's a neutral frog that has a similar thing, I think, with mechs, but since it's type based, it's a lot weaker. Token Hunter just has so many death rattle egg type effects, and with the summon happening and then the frog hopping over, it's so hard to get rid of all of them. So you just die. So you just can't get rid of everything. It's insane. So yeah, I think 1 mana is good. If it ends up not being enough in the long run, I could see it going back to 2 with a +1/+1. That was kind of the other thing that I thought that they might do with it, was just decrease the stats, but I like this as a first attempt because it kind of keeps the card still strong.
How do you like the nerf to Murmur from 6 mana to 7 mana?
I think that's fine.
Very irritated by that. That really annoys me, actually, because Murmur is a Wheel of Death card. It's a Quasar card. It's a Dungar card. I hate those cards. I hate the existence of those cards. I understand that there is a portion of the player base that is hungry for cards like that. They love cards like that. Their experience and the way they play Hearthstone is the antithesis of how I like to enjoy Hearthstone. So I wish that they deleted Murmur from the game. I wish Murmur was a 6 mana give your charge minions +1 attack. That's what I wish they did to Murmur, because I hate it. And I hate what it represents, and I hate everything about it. That being said, I get that that is not a viable opinion to take for a balanced team. Obviously, they won't do something like that. So, but I still think that it is currently only held back by the shift in the metagame and not the nerf itself. So if anything opens up, the potential for this card to become immensely toxic again and warp game experiences is too high, especially in a class that is able to run Parrot Sanctuary, which was a huge enabler of Murmur. I think Murmur should have gone to at least 8 as a change instead of 6 to 7. But that's not likely to be something that they would do where they'd go that extreme. I knew it was coming when they announced Murmur. I'm like, they're just going to make it 6 to 7, and that's not going to be enough, and it's going to piss me off. And then it happened, and currently Murmur and the deck around it sucks, but that's not because of the deck, it's because of the shift in the metagame. So if something changes back, if the meta slows down, all of a sudden we might have a new meta tyrant being Murmur Shaman, and I hate that concept. So personally, huge opponent of that decision.
Do you think if they changed it to be your Battlecry minions cost 1 and cannot cost less than 1,
then it's unplayable? Then nobody plays it ever. It has to be 0. It has to go down to 0, or like the ability to basically do all of these things. I mean, you could maybe still figure out a way, just because like you play the 1 mana thing that refreshes you a ton of mana, but you lose the Parrot Sanctuary thing, and that's kind of the whole engine that really makes it go to do all of the stuff. And maybe then it happens later and it's more palatable as an experience and like isn't so strong, but it probably reaches the point where it's too far away from being strong enough that it's just garbage, and then it gets abandoned. Which, again, I wouldn't mind. I wouldn't mind if it was garbage and it got abandoned. I would be thrilled if it was garbage and got abandoned. I saw when they printed Murmur, and I'm like, why does this card exist? And then it was unplayable, and I was like, oh, thank God. And then it became playable, and I was like, why does this card exist? You know.
Any thoughts on that, Pylet, before we move on to the next card?
Yeah, it is one of those cards to where it has to ride a very fine line. And it's extremely fine with the card like this because it's broken or non-existent, and there's no in between. From playing the deck, the difference of if you're going off on 6, 7, or 8 is a big change. Just with one, either you die beforehand because you get hit in the face too hard, or then the slower decks have enough answers to where if you do the pop off turn and they answer it and then you're just left with nothing, you just don't have a backup plan sometimes. So I do think that the mana with everything else shifting is enough, but I do think that if it keeps coming up, some sort of, addressing the interaction with the location and taking away the 0 mana battle cries, especially since we have Ysera as an automatic 3 mana that you can get back. I think that would be the next step, even if it kills it. If it's still too good now, then the card would have to die. It's just one of those cards, and that's probably okay.
Yeah, like, I don't know, the strategy right now still that can happen with Murmur without too much effort is you have a coin in hand because you're going second, enabling some things, or let's say you're not and it's just a turn slower, but you get Parent Sanctuary up, and then it's either turn 6 you coin out the Murmur, or turn 7 you play the Murmur because you don't have a coin for it, as long as you've already played Sanctuary beforehand. And then you play Murmur, you hit the Sanctuary, you play Shutter Block, you hit the Sanctuary, you play Ysera, now you have 9 mana. And also you're capped at 15. So each subsequent turn is now going to be 15 mana, and you have 9 mana for the rest of this turn, with a mini Shutter Block in hand and all of the other things that you're doing with the battle cries that go off. Basically, it's I wait for this setup, and then I instantly win the game. In, I don't know, like 80+% of cases. And the existence of cards like that is something that always has bothered me. And I think they're defensible in different ways and different play patterns, with like an appropriate amount of setup, but I don't really feel like that's enough of a like setup to be tolerable. But, again, personal bias and opinion.
It's a setup like a combo deck that doesn't kill you on that turn, which makes it even more frustrating. Because you do a combo turn, and then your opponent has to sit there and stare at it and be like, well, I can't do anything against this, but I still have to hit the button to concede, or let them hit me with the random board that they made. And that probably makes it feel even worse than just an OTK deck.
Right.
All right, so the next one really I don't get. So you guys have to explain this one to me. Food Fight went from 3 mana to 4 mana. Now, I understand when we had Grunter Hunter, Food Fight was a part of that enabled it. So I could see maybe a reason for it there, but not really, because Grunter was the problem. And in the recent meta, Food Fight was used to mess up the Armor DH's Death Rattle pool. So that was fine, right? So if that was what it was for, why are we getting it nerfed at this point? Because I haven't seen it anywhere else.
I didn't even know that it was for that. From what I understood, Food Fight was an enabler for being able to get the gigantic dragon out of your deck that could do... It does like damage to a minion and pushes the rest face, and the dragon itself has a super high attack, and then you keep reviving it to just do it over and over, and basically just that's your win condition. So the dev must have identified that was another type of play pattern that was having a little bit too much success, and was very much something that probably was considered to be more of a sentiment outlier nerf. I can't imagine that it had that high of a win rate or that much of a play rate, but I bet everybody who lost to that was really unhappy and let people know about it. I think there were a few other things, just like a super control-y warrior style deck that just used that to make sure that they got their gigantic minions out quicker, and the gigantic minions had taunt, and then they could just play the resurrect taunts card. But the main usage for it was the dragons that I saw.
Oh, interesting. Because I haven't not run into that once. Pylet, have you seen that?
Yeah, I saw it and played it a couple times, and when I saw that this was on the nerf list, I'm like, oh, that must be a lot more consistent than I thought it was going to be. And looking back, I did see if it was getting some refinement as it was going, and just becoming this very all-in, how quick can you get the dragon summoned and resurrected, and it was pushing the archetype up into upper tier 2, close to tier 1, and that's the type of deck that they don't like being quite in that range, because it feels very scammy, even if it might not be. It's not like a ramp druid type scam, but it is very much like, oh, here's a giant dragon and you're just going to die when I summon it 4 or 5 more times. So must have been more consistent than we thought, and probably something that, since we have that card for the rest of the year, is something that they want to play around also.
Yeah, I was surprised that they nerfed the card, but I'm not at all unhappy that they nerfed it. It's a card that I would probably just never even consider playing, or a deck that I'd never really be interested in playing. And I'm just looking at the card like, yeah, this is probably just like, this kind of sucks, or it does something really stupid and broken. Yeah, go ahead and nerf that. That sounds good.
Yep.
Yeah, just get out in front of it. Screw that card.
Well, Ron, how do you feel about Spawning Pool going from 1 mana to 2 mana? That's the location that get a 1/1 Zergling, Death Rattle, your Zerg minions have rush this turn.
It's a brutal nerf. Again, it had to happen. They had to change Spawning Pool. And I can't think of a way to change Spawning Pool outside of changing its mana cost. But it is rough when you take a 1 mana card and make it 2. It is so much more significant than, say, taking a 6 mana Murmur and making it a 7 mana Murmur. This is doubling the cost of the card for Spawning Pool. It changes your good turn 1 of play Spawning Pool to do nothing and wait. It changes the timing of a whole lot of things that you can do. Also, Spawning Pool's strength mainly lay in its Death Rattle, which you have to click the location, wait, then click the location again. So it feels like it's even heavier of a nerf, because you can no longer start rushing on 3 if you played the Spawning Pool on 1. Now the earliest you can do it is 4, and you're missing a lot of tempo and other things. Again, the card was too good, and it had to be addressed, but I don't know how to change it in a way that doesn't feel really, really rough. But it is what it is. The crazy thing is the card is still actually, I think it's still pretty good. I think you can't cut it from your decks that thrive off like the Zerg strategy. So yeah, I mean, they probably had to do it. The card was just way too good at 1, and it just feels kind of bad to have it go from 1 to 2 because of the impact that makes. But maybe the card always should have been 2,
What if you left it at 1 and changed it to summon a 1/1 Zergling? So therefore it doesn't double, and then you're still getting the advantage of the Zerg having rush on turn 3.
What do you mean summon? Like, you don't get a thing in your hand, it just puts a Zergling on the board? So you don't get 2 1/1s, you get 1/1/1?
Yes. But then you still get the rush on the third click.
But the third click would just summon a single 1/1 and give rush to it? Yeah, that would suck.
Yes.
That'd be an awful card. I don't think I would want to play it.
But it gives rush to your other Zergs too as well.
What other Zerg? I need the Zerglings. I need 2 Zerglings specifically for a Hydralisk. When it comes to Hunter, Warlock barely cares. Warlock is just using that to get more location clicks to get giants, but like sometimes it's useful. Warlock cares a little bit because they also run the DK location, so they can click the thing and rush in multiple Zerglings, click the thing. Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, that would be a much worse nerf than 2 mana. I would riot if they made that nerf. I would be really unhappy. I think that's a disaster.
Pylet, your thoughts on Spawning Pool?
Yeah, I agree with all that. If they didn't have to nerf it for both Hunter and Warlock, I think it would have been really funny if it was just a Hunter card, if they would have nerfed it by adding a durability.
For Demon Hunter. Don't you know about Demon Hunter's extensive use of the Zerg archetype?
I forgot DH had Zerg, to be honest. I've seen it a couple times. But for Hunter, it would have been really fun if they just added a durability to it so you couldn't get the rush until turn 5, because that probably slows it down enough, even though you're getting the extra Zergling. But yeah, it's one of those weird cards where there's a lot of stuff on the card, but not a lot of stuff to change other than the mana cost. and it makes it really tricky, especially since they already nerfed the Zergling itself.
Yeah, durability might actually kind of ruin the card too, come to think of it. And again, Warlock maybe mines less because they can blow up their own location a little bit faster if they have to, although they wouldn't want to. But it would ruin things for Hunter and I guess any Demon Hunter deck that decided to play Zerg for some crazy reason. It'd be the very funny buff that's actually a nerf, which we've seen a similar thing before with the nerf that was actually a buff for Hunter's Jungle Gym location. Because Jungle Gym at 3 durability in its original existence wound up taking up too much board space for too long. So getting it down to 2 clicks, well, it's like, oh, it's a nerf, but like, was it? Because now I have board space free faster and I can play the other thing that kills you. It's kind of funny.
All right, so Liftoff went from 3 mana to 4 mana. I think that was pretty much a no-brainer. That's the draw 2 Terran cards, summon a 2/1 Starship piece with the with an effect when launched. Any problems with that, or any thoughts on that?
No issue with it. I think just another preemptive thing. Nobody's playing Terran Shaman or any Terran deck really at the moment that I've seen. Shaman and Warrior are the ones, and then Paladin really never had any good like Terran support cards to enable the archetype, so you never saw Terran Paladin. But Terran Shaman was insanely dominant before the previous patch and the expansion that rolled out, and then Warrior was still solid. This card has been completely insane the whole time, and with all the other nerfs, especially addressing Protoss and Zerg again, they probably just wanted to make sure that they didn't leave something out of the equation and leave a super powerful Terran card in that might need some addressing soon. So I don't hate it. I think it's a decent move. It probably should have happened like way before now, but you know, it's fine that it happened now.
Pylet, you seem to agree?
Yeah, that, and jumping ahead to Chrono Boost, because that's the next one on our list. Both of those just being nerfed by a mana when it's draw a targeted draw 2 cards that fit with this card and summon something. Both of those did way too much for their mana cost as it was.
Speaking of doing way too much for their mana cost, Artanis went from 7 mana to 8 mana, which I was confused when I saw that it went from 7 mana to 8 mana, because I don't think I've ever not seen it played on 5.
Yeah. Hero Power Druid before the expansion absolutely loved to play super early Artanis and go crazy. But it just kind of makes sense to nerf Artanis too. I mean, they already changed the other 2 hero cards from 7 to 8, so it seemed like only a matter of time before Artanis would get the same treatment, especially with Protoss decks being more successful lately.
Now they all corrupt the tree.
That's right. Yeah, you just needed to be able to corrupt the tree. Is the whole reason to nerf every hero card. It's actually a buff, tree buff, easy.
Nice. Arcanite Defense Crystal went from 4 mana to 5 mana. This is the card. The main reason this happened, I don't think, was the card itself doesn't need to cost more. I don't think it's the fact that it was interacting with the card that would resummon this twice, and then you had the card that would resummon that card multiple times, and it just became a problem. So I think I don't think this card really needed to change, except that it needed to go like 5. Going to 5 made perfect sense given that interaction that we had. I think we're all happy that this is dead, so I think we could just move on to the next card. Unless you have anybody wants to add anything. I thought we've talked about it a bit.
I just think it's important to note that it was specifically a Armored Demon Hunter card nerf, and they didn't think the card itself was that much of a problem outside of its initial nerf already to drop from 6 armor gain to 4 armor gain the last time they addressed it, which is probably why they gave it +1/+1 in stats in addition to its increase in mana cost. The one other thing to say about that is there were a lot of ideas floating around about how to change Armored Demon Hunter, but a lot of it was kind of talking about dealing with the 5/3 and how that operated, but it seemed very clear that they wanted Demon Hunter to be able to do other cool things with different cards that they printed in the set that have specific mana costs, like 4, that worked so much better for the 5/3 that they weren't really going to try to change the new stuff that they just made. They were changing the old thing that worked in a toxic way with their new stuff, in, I guess, the unintended consequence of what they printed.
Pylet?
Yeah, it is a bit worrisome. I think Tito and I were talking about the other day that I like how they're supporting the Death Rattle DH, but those 2 Resurrect cards set up any potential toxic play pattern. So Arcanite Defense Crystal can be swapped with any Death Rattle that costs 4 or less. That
Right.
If it keeps coming back is toxic, and I think that could end up being a problem in the long run, because now I have to look at every single Death Rattle that costs 4 or less for the next 2 years and see, does this break Demon Hunter? And there will probably be something that does, and it kind of puts them in quite a box with any Death Rattle support that they were wanting to give Demon Hunter going forward, unfortunately.
I agree in theory with a lot of what you're saying, but counterpoint, nothing could possibly break it as much as a starship piece.
True.
Specifically being a starship piece and armor and taunt. So like that was a very unique situation.
Yes.
And just the nature of starship pieces in general is what made it so uniquely terrible and broken. And there's going to be a whole bunch of other potential 4-mana Death Rattle cards that might be really good, and you could say the Demon Hunter will break the game with this, but they would not have any chance of having the level of success that they would with that. Probably the worst case scenario I could imagine would be an untargetable taunt. If there was a 4-mana Death Rattle taunt that was untargetable, that Demon Hunter could keep reviving, maybe that could be a huge problem. Even then, you could just target the 5/3. Like there were counters that we saw emerging where Shaman has Hex, and you just hex the ship. Or, oh, well, they played the 5/3, I'll hex the 5/3. Or you could play Grifton and steal the 5/3 and smack it into the thing. Grifton never gave steal, though, in that moment. Never, ever.
No.
So, yeah, that's fair.
Do you think they could ever go to a place where they would just ban a card from a class, like saying, hey, Arcanite's Defense Crystal cannot be played in Demon Hunter right now?
Unlikely. They've done a ban before, though. I mean, they straight up just banned cards from the game for a short stretch of time. They usually never perma-ban things. I can't imagine that is something that would be likely that they would do in the future, to ever like permanently ban a card, and then especially not like a short-term ban for like one specific class. It's possible. It's certainly a route that they could go, but I feel like it goes counter to their design and game plan philosophy.
Because that would happen a lot with Druid, I think. Yep, this is banned in Druid.
Dungar, banned in Druid. Unplayable literally everywhere else. Enjoy.
Well, it had a moment in Shaman, I think.
Because of Murmur,
yeah.
which we've already talked about.
Yes.
I thought there was a different list I was in, though. Anyway, Seaside Giant feels like it got pretty hard. It was a 10 mana, cost 2 less for each time you've used the location in this game. Now it is a 9 mana, cost 1 less for each time you've used the location in this game. So I think this is, outside of killing the Armor DH, I think this is probably the biggest nerf to a card in this particular, maybe the Zerg location too, but this one feels like it's real bad.
This one's the most significant for sure. This is the nerf that has changed the meta. This is the one that opened up everything for a brand new meta that we're experiencing right now. They absolutely murdered this card. Like, the funny thing is, Warlock might still be able to get away with being location Warlock and being good. That might be a thing that still rises to the top and stays a tier 1 deck or like high tier 2 or something. I can totally see it because location Warlock plays lots of locations. They have the DK one. That means you can click over and over and over, and you still get the free giant reasonably quickly. And giants are basically bad if they're not free, and they're insane when they're free. So the whole calculus is how quickly can I make the giant free? And that's what makes him broken. It's honestly another pet peeve of mine that's kind of existed throughout the course of Hearthstone's history, where they just really like printing cards that say giant, and giant will either be bad or it will be insane in nearly every iteration, because all of the giants have discount factor built into them, which means none of them say X mana cost giant. They all say 0 mana 8/8, meet X condition in order to allow yourself to have a 0 mana 8/8. And then how consistent, how good is that condition that enables that? What this does as a nerf, it completely destroys Seaside Giant for Hunter. Seaside Giant becomes, I think, completely unplayable for Hunter. Whereas before, you could have seen 3 10/9 giants hit the board on turn 3 for Hunter. Obviously, that's a problem. Obviously, that shouldn't exist or be allowed to continue to exist. So they needed to address it. But there's a different problem with Location Warlock. So now it feels like a disparate impact type of nerf, which is frustrating, especially for me who likes Hunter more than other decks. But I think overall, a good change. I don't really know. I was wondering how they were going to change it, because I felt like they had to make it discount by 1, not discount by 2. And then I'm like, so that ruins the card for one class and makes it maybe still fine for another. But like, we needed to see less giants faster, and this nerf will accomplish that. It has accomplished that, and it's changed the game completely from what it was to what it is now. And overall, I have to agree with it, even if some aspects are frustrating.
I used to think I always thought this card was better than it was, because it never used to see play when we first saw it. And it took a while, but it just felt like it should have been good, because there's enough locations out there where you should be able to take advantage of it. And they did once they did. Pylet, you played a bit of this deck. Thoughts?
Yeah, it's one that needed to happen. So I kind of figured that they would up it by 1 or 2 location clicks, not 4. But it needed something drastic, especially because from what we've seen with the past few sets since they've introduced locations, they're going to keep printing them. It seems like it's a card type that they have really enjoyed exploring and putting in, so we're just going to keep getting more, and that means that there's more classes that can play a lot of locations, and something else would be able to get it out way too quick, other than just Hunter and Warlock. So something that needed to happen, probably, falls out of pretty much every list except for Location Warlock right now, but hopefully with the putting it at 9, it puts it a chance to kind of find a Seaside Giant role if it has the right deck to somewhat be playable, but probably not anytime soon.
Yeah, honestly, I just wish they would do something different about like certain styles that they're like permanently locked into. It seems like the card says giant, which means it is mandatory to be an 8/8, right? But we could have changed the stats.
Mm-hmm.
That is a thing that was like physically possible. We could have elected to make it a 5/5 or a 4/4 or something, and maybe adjust the mana cost a little bit from there, so it's not absurdly broken when it comes down super fast. You could still have a card that comes down super fast, but it just doesn't have unreal, ridiculous stats that are going to end the game on the spot, But I guess it's not allowed because card says giant, so it must be an 8/8. And like that frustrates me, but that's a soapbox thing that'll never change. I'm just gonna be an old man yelling at a cloud.
It does. It can change though. They did it once where
when have they changed the stats of a giant?
No, not a giant, but like the what you were just talking about, how some things they just don't get away from. They finally made one of the old gods cost 9 when they always had to cost 10.
Oh yeah.
So
that came to my mind also. So it's one of those things where it's just true. Like, they could do it.
Tradition
but it's
before.
weird.
So let's break it again then, please. We can do other things besides just, the mana cost is going to change, or we're gonna we're going to change the effect of this thing. If there are other things that could adjust the card in a more reasonable way to allow it to be played and, not hit that problematic state, maybe we could explore that. I don't know.
Okay. Speaking of problematic state, Dungar has gone from 9 to 10. I don't think they've done enough. What else could they do? Make it a death rattle?
Dungar, they should make that give your charge minions +1 attack. Honestly, I despise that card. I think it has absolutely no place to exist in Hearthstone. The style of a Dungar deck is something that is very counter to anything I would describe as an enjoyable Hearthstone experience. And if it doesn't work, then okay, that was dumb and boring. If it does work, wow, I hated this. That was awful. On to the next thing. So I don't know, 0 upside for that card to ever be playable. I would prefer it to be deleted. Personal stance, biased, hate the card, hate the concept. Sure, great, it went to 10. Now it's not 9 and it costs more. I wish it didn't exist.
So, Ron, how do you feel about this card? No, Pylet, what are your thoughts on? What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, agreed. And they did all they could with mana without making it a Druid / Ysera deck card. So, I mean, there's not much else they can do other than change the text box, which we normally don't see with these balance changes. Anyways.
I swear, if they made Dungar a 1/1, I would lose my mind. It's not the stats, right? It's not the stats.
Right, so the Ceaseless Expanse went from 100 mana to 125 mana. Was it enough?
Oh my god. I don't know. I think it just winds up being still good in the decks that you don't want it to be good in, and no longer playable in the decks that it wasn't as big of a problem in, to be honest. They did probably have to do something about the card. I don't know how to adjust it to a point that makes enough sense. But I already know essentially what it feels like is going to happen is the really slow control decks will just make it to that point where they can still play the Ceaseless and have an unbelievably broken turn to win the game. And the other decks now probably have to cut it because it can't happen fast enough. There is obviously an impact and a dramatic impact. A 25 mana nerf is intense. Now, it's not the same as with any other card, obviously, because of how its discount factor works. So it still gets exponentially discounted, and 25 mana increase, I don't really know what that works out to, how much slower it happens, what turns it comes down instead of what turns it was coming down. They probably have that kind of data to suggest that, hey, 25 mana is the right point for this. But it will absolutely change things, and there will be different moments where, hey, your opponent in the past could have played a Ceaseless here to clear the entire board. Now they can't. They have to do something else that requires real resources that cost more mana than 0, and that enables you to, work yourself into a position to win the game, or vice versa. So, I support it, even though it's another weird one that kind of irritates me. It's just the existence of the card is always going to be problematic because it's always essentially going to be a 0 mana 10/10 full board clear.
Well, I mean, that would in itself be fine, except that you can follow it up with a bunch of stuff, right?
Exactly,
so what if it was
0. 0 is the problem.
What if it read Battle Cry, destroy all other minions, you can't play minions for the rest of the turn?
And your turn.
I don't know. It's too important to be able to do a swing turn with the Ceaseless, because then it winds up being bad in way too many scenarios. So, I would prefer a Ceaseless nerf that says, this is 100 mana, and this costs less for each of the things that's in the text box already, cannot discount below 5. As an example, hey, you always have to spend 5 mana in order to play this card. So you can't play a 6 mana card or 6 mana worth of cards in tandem with this, which is what makes it such a problem so many times. I I think that would be a much better nerf than making it cost 25 more. And I'm not saying 5 is a sweet spot. Maybe it's 4, maybe it's even 2 or something. And then you might increase the cost from 100 to 110 or so. I don't know. But like, again, there's more ways to change a card than the prescribed ways they typically go for. And I wish they would go outside the box a little bit more and go a little bit harder on the, when this thing costs 0 mana, it is absurdly broken, like super insane, impossible to beat type of power level with certain strategies or certain game states. And I don't like the existence of that really in general in the game. I also just want to make it clear that I'm not arguing against the existence of 0 mana cards. And I'm not saying that we should have a blanket, but not less than 1 type of thing, like, gets memed to death. But there are certain cards and effects that probably should state this always has a cost rather than this can be 0.
Yeah, it feels like there definitely needs to be more of a downside for sure. Pilot, thoughts?
Yeah, it's one of those cards where it is always going to fall in a very weird spot also, because playing it in a control deck, and if you're in a control mirror, it takes forever to discount because no one is doing enough stuff to discount it. So then it's just a dead card if you're in a control mirror, because it still costs 50 on turn 15, because no one's done anything. So it's one where, the more aggressive decks or cycle type decks that are out there, the better the card is. And it makes it very, very interesting to kind of find that sweet spot. It's one where when Tito and I were talking, I also could have seen another very heavy stat hit on this, with the knowing that it's just like, this is always a 0 mana board clear. You don't get a 10/10 with it. I make it smaller so that it's also not killing you when it's clearing your board. And I think that that's something that I honestly could have seen both mana and stats, because it's still a 10/10 that you have to find a way to deal with. And 9 times out of 10, the way to deal with it is your own ceaseless. And then it just shifts the problem to the other player.
Yeah, I mean, it was 15, so dropping it to 10 was certainly relevant, but in a weird way that actually felt like it was a stealth buff a lot of the time, because it disabled some of the counterplay of, well, now I'm going to play Grifta and steal your ceaseless and kill you with it. But now it does less damage and I can't kill you with it. What the hell? Why is it 10 now? Is weird. So there's a different problem with changing its stats to lower. Yes, it's less threatening, but also there's less ways to use your opponent doing that against them, which decreases the amount of counterplay and gets frustrating in other ways.
Well, you can even do something if you get really weird, like if you were thinking outside the box. Every once in a while, they give us a nerf that changes a card somewhat in an interesting way. You can make this cost 1 less for you. Keep it the way it is. 112 mana, 10/10. Battle cry, destroy all other minions. Until your next turn, this is a 1/1. And then when it gets to your next turn, then it comes back to a 10/10, but it then kind of, it like shrinks and then expands like stars or something like that. And you cannot, your opponent has an opportunity to kill it.
Maybe if you also made it immune, this is a 1/1 with immune until your next turn. Because like if it's just a 1/1, then it immediately dies, and that sucks and feels bad. And they'd have to use some kind of like unconditional effect, like a deadly shot type of effect, unconditional removal thing to get rid of the 1/1 that is eventually going to be threatening. But I kind of like the idea. Just I would adjust it a little so it's not like, oh, I played my big powerful minion, but it's actually tiny right now, so it means it's like the easiest thing in the world for them to deal with, it that is just gone, and then I'm sad because I'm not going to have my 10/10 ever.
Yeah, you might not have your 10/10, but you might still have all the other things you played, so like,
sure, yeah,
I don't know, just thinking outside the box.
No, it's creative.
Maybe there's some ways. All right. I think you already talked about Pylet, right? So
Yep.
let's move on to the buffs. We're dangerously into coin concede length territory here, so I'm gonna just go through the buffs real quick, and then if you guys have any thoughts on any particular ones or anything, or all of them if you want, but I don't want to. I know Ron, you want to go celebrate your victory. So Resplendent Dreamweaver was it's a neutral, a 4-mana 5/4 battle cry. If you've imbued your hero power, deal 5 damage to a minion. Now it is a 4/4 lifesteal battle cry. If you've imbued your hero power twice, deal 4 damage to a minion. So this feels like sorry, I meant to just read them. Never mind. Symbiosis, old. Discover a choose 1 card from another class. We were actually wondering how they were going to change this. Discover a choose 1 card from another class. It costs 1 less. Kildari Priestess. I don't think this one needed a buff. 4-mana 4/4. Now it's a 3-mana 3/3, and it's battle cry. Give all enemy minions -2 attack until your next turn, and imbue your hero power. Lunar Wing Messenger is an old. Old was a 3/1. Now it's a 3/2, and this is lifesteal battle cry. Imbue your hero power. It's a beast, but for priest. Aspect's Embrace, restore 4 health, imbue your hero power. Now it's restore 4 health. Draw a card, imbue your hero power for 2 mana. That feels good. And Living Garden was a 2/3, now it's a 2/4, and that's a battle cry, imbue your hero power. Reduce the cost of your minions in hand by 1. Clearly they want to push imbue, especially in some of the classes that aren't really doing much with them. Any thoughts on any of these, Ron?
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like, they're trying to push imbue. It does not look good to have imbue as their signature mechanic of the new expansion, and for every single imbue deck to be garbage. So they're hoping that they'll become a little bit more playable. The Dreamweaver was really interesting to me that they gave it lifesteal. I think it went from completely unplayable to, whoa, this card might actually be good. Symbiosis, a necessary change. Like, I support it. I think it's reasonable to give a discount. I don't mind the Priestess change. I think Lunar Wing Messenger always should have been a 3/2. It was weird that it was a 3/1 because it's just like really extra bad for not really enough reason. Aspect's Embrace was hilariously unplayable, and it shifted to actually maybe pretty good. Turns out, adding draw a card as text to your card makes it sometimes incredible, but actually appealing to, want to run imbue cards. Before, this was there literally just to imbue and felt horrible to spend 2 mana on. Now you can play an imbue shaman and still lose, but have a card that's not nearly as bad. And then the Living Garden, sure. I mean, whatever. Imbue shaman still looks terrible, but maybe it'll be slightly better. It's something.
Not all draw is good. Didn't Shaman get a garbage card last expansion that was like, draw 2 cards, you can't play them for 2 turns or something?
Well, yeah, I mean,
Yes.
You don't want to have a card that says draw a card and then add on other text on top of that, like that says go yourself. I edited myself a little bit there. Just, I don't know how much you want cursing on your show. So,
Oh, I bleep it out. It's fine.
yeah.
I write down the times when you curse, and we've had Warshak on, so that's par for the course.
Solid. But yeah,
Pylet, any thoughts? Go ahead.
One other thing about that card, the draw that you can't play them on this turn, that card is so insanely bad, but also just shows how stupidly broken and awful of a deck concept Murmur is, because Murmur Shaman started playing that card because they just needed things to do to assemble pieces early, and they didn't care that they weren't going to be able to play it for 2 turns. So they're allowed to play one of the worst cards in the game because the rest of their deck is so insanely off the charts dumb. Okay. And rant.
I did not know that was ever saw a play. Pylet, any thoughts on these buffs?
Yeah, I agree with pretty much all of what Ron said. The imbue stuff just needed to happen because those were the 2 imbue classes that weren't really seeing any play or anything. The Symbiosis is better with that discount. I don't know why I didn't think about it when we were talking the other day. That's kind of the obvious thing that they've kind of gone to with these, discover something, and let's go ahead and give you back the mana that you spent on this card to discover it. Sometimes Dreamweaver is a lot better, especially just because now any of the imbue decks that are a little bit slower now have that to help stabilize. because it's not just the damage from the battle cry that has lifesteal, it's the 4/4 itself. So if they're having to trade into it, that is a lot of life that you're getting back. And a couple of the imbue decks kind of need that just to stabilize turn 4 and 5 until that imbue hero power starts to really pay off. I did want to jump just before we kind of finish things up. There were a couple things that weren't balance changes, but were bug fixes that I think are important to bring up. One of them was Shaladrisil. They did fix the bug where it could get activated by your opponent playing cards that cost more than that. I think there's still some funkiness going on with it sometimes, but it sounds like they're kind of getting it narrowed down. I wonder if it was similar to how Orbital Halo used to discount to 0 if it was on the end of your hand and your opponent played a card on their turn, if it was something funny with how everything was just interacting in the client. And they also fixed the egg from the warrior location. The horrible egg would change if the source dragon was transformed. I know, Tito, you ran into that to where your dragon got hexed and then the egg summoned a frog instead of a dragon. That is fixed if you are trying to experiment with Dragon Warrior.
Yeah, that was really weird. I had that one game and Goku thought it was the way it was supposed to be, but like my dragon was transformed and like, oh, let's just pop the egg, and the egg became a frog. And I was like, what? That can't be right.
It's hilarious.
It wasn't funny at the time. All right.
Yeah, I mean,
so that is the standard.
Of course.
Oh no, it was funny. I have to admit, I did laugh. All right, so those were the standard upgrades. Now let's dive into the battleground updates. I'm just kidding. So Ron, our question for you this week is: what is your favorite non-hunter deck of all time?
There are other decks.
Yes.
What?
I know I'm not talking to Sidisi because I've watched you do roulette.
Yeah, no, I have an answer for that one. It is Battlecry Quest Shaman. Back in the Galakron Lackey days, I really, really enjoyed that deck a lot, where you could just, it was like a roundabout way to do a lot of the most fun things that I've been able to do over the course of Hearthstone's history, where basically just when you can double a battle cry, it is really powerful and fun. And that deck just got to run lots of battle cry minions and ways to generate battle cry things, and then you got to double them, and it was exciting and cool. Definitely that one.
Fair enough. Folks, I hope you like the show. If you're still listening to us at the 1 hour and 52 minute mark, I assume that you enjoy listening to us talk about Hearthstone. Give us a review. Let other people enjoy us talking about Hearthstone because they found us. Pylet, where can people find you on social media?
You can mainly find me on Discord. I'm in a few various common Hearthstone Discords at Pylet712, Pylet. You can also find me on Twitter as well.
Ron, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Ron_HS, where basically I would just tweet about going live on Twitch. And then you can find me on Twitch streaming Monday through Friday, right around 7 p.m. Eastern at RonMexico HS. And
you can find me on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, TikTok, and hopefully soon Signal at Tito Santana HS. Ron, do you have any shout outs or anything you'd like to promote this week?
No promotions, just apologies for the excessive ranting. I got passionate about a number of things she brought up, so I know I carried the runtime a bit higher than you might have intended, but it was fun, and I'm happy to be here and appreciate you guys.
Honestly, Ron, that's what we want here. If it's much better to have an impassioned conversation, be like, how'd you like the nerf? It was fine. So, this is a verbal media, and we like when people talk. And if you're here talking and you're not just trying to get out the door, we know that means you like to come in here. So we appreciate you. Pylet, any shout outs this week?
I think just shout out to Ron for joining us and having a good conversation over balance and patch expectations and things like that. It was really fun to chat about it this episode.
I concur. And I don't really have any shout outs this week. Just thank
Gators,
you everybody
then.
out there. Go Gators.
Just throw in a Go Gators.
Go Minutemen. I think we're done. I think we're toast now. We'll see you.
See ya.
Slide two brothers meet one another when they slide up to the mic. It's bread and butter with one another. Let's start up that recording light.